Dr. Gurian is a former dental student, graduated from Temple Dental. We are honored to have him as an alumni and speaking to us for the second session this evening. Not only is he a graduate dentist, but he's also a comedy writer, performer, director, author, producer, and radio personality, and not necessarily in that order. He also was a former clinical faculty at NYU Dental School in the medicine and oral facial pain department. He's a practitioner of spiritual healing, and he's been on the board of the Association of Spirituality and Psychotherapy. So I am going to open it up to you, Dr. Gurian. Thank you again for giving us time in the evening to present to our students and faculty. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanne, and thank you again to you for facilitating this, and to Dean Ismail for inviting me to do this very special thing, especially for me. Is very special. I just want to encourage everyone who is presentable to turn on their cameras. It's very difficult to speak to just black boxes. So if you're dressed and you're presentable, that would be great if you could turn that on. Tonight is going to be a little bit different because it's going to be more interactive. I'm going to be asking some questions at times, and I think that if you press that little thing where you raise your hand, I'll be able to get to call on you, or to be able to handle your questions, and also to see your answers. So tonight the topic is the power of sensitivity. But before I start on that, in my last talk I talked a lot about fear, and I wanted to read a statement to you that I consider a very powerful statement. I use it in all of my work, and I want to see if it resonates with any of you. It's called About Fear. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It's our light, not our darkness, that frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Your playing small doesn't serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that others won't feel insecure around you. We were born to manifest the glory within us. It's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And I wonder if that resonates with any of you. It's taken from a book by Marianne Williamson, one of the great people in the consciousness world, from her book on A Course in Miracles. And I wonder, have any of you, are you familiar with that statement at all? Anybody? If you are, you can just, I'm not going to call on you for that, but I'd be curious to see if anybody has heard of it. I use it in all my work, especially when I work with stutterers, because very often in life we tend to hold ourselves back. We don't rise to our highest levels. Very often we'll engage in self-sabotage and things like that. Just when we're about to achieve something great, we do something to mess it up. And what this statement means is that, sometimes fear can hold us back in life. You go through 4 years of your education, and then it's time to go out into practice. And a lot of us experience fear. Like, are we going to be successful? Are we going to be able to do, to take everything that we learned and put it into practice? And, after all this work and all this money, are we going to be able to do what we've been trained to do? And the concept of this is that, yeah, we're allowed to be very successful. You don't have to hold yourself back. My own personal experience, as I told last time, I was a very severe stutterer. And I stuttered through my 20s and beyond. I stuttered when I was in dental school. And as you can see, I no longer stutter. It took me many years to cure myself. I had to do it on my own because no one was able to help me. and I learned about the power of thought. And I learned that I created a disability for myself that wasn't real. Through my thoughts, holding myself back, I was afraid to be who I could be. I felt that I needed to be less in order to make other people feel good about themselves. And I don't know if any of you can relate to that, but I was the kind of kid in school who made believe that I didn't know the answer when the teacher called on me, because I didn't want the other kids to think that I thought I was smart. Not that I was smart, but I didn't want them to think that I thought I was smart. I would rather say that I didn't know the answer so that I could feel like one of the other kids, as opposed to allowing myself to stand out. And what I learned from this statement is that it's okay to be successful. It's okay to be a superstar, because when you do that, you become an inspiration to other people. You don't make other people feel bad. They look up to you and they say, hopefully they tell themselves, if he can do it, I can do it too. And that's what I tell people that I work with who stutter. I tell them, if I was able to cure myself, then you can do the same thing, because we all have the same 46 chromosomes, right? We all have the same body parts. I didn't do magic. If I was able to create something in my life, you could do the same thing in your life. And that's tied in with sensitivity. So I'm going to start with a proposal to you guys that we're all more sensitive than we want to admit. And I want to ask a question. Have any of you ever been told, and you can press the little, the little hand raising thing if this applies to you. Has anyone ever told you that you were too sensitive? Or did you ever feel that you were too sensitive? Okay, I see one person. No one else no one else had that experience. Nobody. Let me scroll down. Not one person. Just one person, huh? Two people. Okay. It's okay to admit it if it happened to you. If you felt that you were too sensitive in your life, if things bothered you too much, if you had experiences that stayed with you and you didn't feel like you could shake them, painful experiences, if you feel things very deeply. Okay, people are starting to open up a little bit now. That's good. Some names I'm not familiar with. I see, well, this is good. I see a couple of guys. Very often, women are more open to experiencing that. I know and I talked about this a little bit the last time, but men very often block their feelings. We're not taught to allow ourselves to feel, and many years ago in my quest for happiness, I tried a lot of different things, and I went to this thing called LifeSpring. And LifeSpring is an experiential thing. You spend a whole weekend with people from all over the world. People come from all different countries and very multicultural backgrounds, and you experience things with them in small groups, sometimes one-on-one, sometimes small, just small groups. And by the end of the weekend, you're hugging people from all over the world. And you find out that everyone's basically the same. They may look a little different. They have names that you're not used to, but people are basically the same. And one of the things that struck me that I remember all these years was there was a man there who from Japan, and he told the story of never being hugged by his parents. And now that he had children, he didn't hug his children, and he felt bad about it. And by the end of the weekend, he told this story and he was in tears. And it meant so much to me to see that, because it was easier for people who grew up in this country, who didn't have a different background, to feel their feelings. But for this man to overcome the blocks that he grew up with because he was raised a certain way, it was so tremendous to me. It was really huge to see him shedding tears. And someone at the last lecture that I gave asked about crying, if I ever experienced shedding tears for anything. And I said, yeah, when you're sensitive, it's okay to do that. It happens sometimes without being able to control it. But the fact that this man, through the course of a weekend, was able to overcome his background and the way he was taught, it was very moving to me. It was really very touching, and I've never forgot it all these years. So when we talk about sensitivity in our field, in the field of dentistry, it's very important. Of the five senses, touch is the most powerful of all the senses. I was a very, very sensitive kid growing up, and my sensitivity overwhelmed me. I didn't know how to handle it. And I remember when I was 7 or 8 years old, I already knew that I could take away certain pain from people just by touching them with my hands, which is one of the things that opened me up to the concept of past lives. Because sometimes you'll find that little kids have a talent. Like you read about these 3-year-old piano prodigies or violin prodigies, and you're like, where did they get a talent like that at such a young age? And I'm open to the concept that it could come from a previous existence. Now, nobody knows whether those things are true or not. But when someone questions it, I always ask them the same question. How can it diminish you in any way to open your mind to the concept that that could be possible? Reincarnation, when people stop living, the energy has to go someplace. You can't kill energy. So it's a possibility that it could go into some other person, some other place, some animal, a person. There are some cultures that believe in that very strongly. And for me, my parents didn't know anything about healing, about energy. Nobody told me that. It just came to me intuitively. And I used to do it on my sister and on people as I grew up and got older. Anytime someone had pain, it just made sense to me. I would put my hands on them and take away the pain, which helped me a lot when I decided that I wanted to be a dentist. Because as I said last time, I knew that I was too sensitive to become a physician, an MD, because I knew that I couldn't handle life and death situations. But with teeth, the worst that could happen is the nerve dies. So, you do root canal work, that's it. I don't have to worry about mortality. It's very rare that anyone will die in dentistry. And so I decided when I was 12 years old that I wanted to be a dentist, and I was already writing comedy. And so, as I said earlier, my whole life has been that split. I was able to create something. I'm not even sure how I did it. It seems to be kind of a unique thing, and I was able to combine. They're really two art forms, because dentistry, of course, is a science, but it's also an art. It's one of the few things in medicine where there's artistry involved. And to come back to sensitivity, sensitivity is very important in dealing with patients. I had that experience also when I taught at NYU. Again, it has a lot to do with your background and how you were raised. I grew up in a family where people hugged each other. They didn't necessarily open up about very personal things, because in my family, if you told the truth, it was like you were insulting someone. So everyone was very nice, everyone was kind, everyone always had good things to say about each other, whether it was true or not. But I was accustomed to being sensitive. But if people have told you in your life that you were too sensitive, what you'll find is that if you're a sensitive being, it's a great strength. It's not a weakness, but there are people that will come into your life that won't understand that. And one of the things that's important to learn is that to honor your sensitivity, it's important to censor your life. Not everybody deserves to be part of your life, your personal life. When you're dealing with patients, you have no choice about who comes into your office. And there's a technique that I'm going to teach you about protecting your heart energy, because as a sensitive person, you can absorb another person's energy. And you've probably had the experience that sometimes we have friends that have a very negative mindset. And when you're with them, after they leave you, you feel depressed. Have any of you ever had that experience? You can click the hand thing. If you know people that are negative, and then when you're with them, they want to tell you all their troubles, all their problems, and they're like a drain of your energy. And by the time they leave, you feel depressed and they feel great because you helped them. They came to you for your support, and you were open and willing to give it to them. But it only goes one way. It never comes back. Not because they don't want to, not because they're mean people, but some people don't have the capacity. They're not in touch with that part of themselves. They're not in touch with their sensitivity. And so you have to be very careful. If you're a sensitive person, you have to almost censor your life and know when you can share your sensitivity and when you have to hold back. Because before I learned that, my sensitivity was so overwhelming to me that it made me detach from uncomfortable circumstances, which made it look like I didn't care. When the truth was that I cared too much. And I was afraid to put myself in certain situations because there was a time if I was with you and you were sad, I was sadder for you than you were. I overfelt my feelings. I'm like a radio antenna for feelings. And so when I'm with you, I'm internalizing what you're putting out. So throughout my life, people have always come to me to ask my advice, and you'll find that if you're a sensitive person, and again, you can't change your basic nature. You can try, but it doesn't really work. People will come to you, they get a sense, when we talk about sensitivity, we also have to talk about, I guess you could call it vibes, vibrations. When you meet people, when they come into your presence, people that you've never met before, you get a sense about them right away. Some people, they make you feel great. Other people make you feel weird sometimes. And those feelings are real. You're picking up on some energy that they're putting out. And I think it's important to learn to trust your first impression. We're trained to give people the benefit of the doubt, and there's something to that as well. But you'll find that very often your first impression is the true one. And again, women seem to have that much stronger. They learn to trust their intuition much more than men do. I'm always envious of women for that. They're very comfortable with feeling things. When I was in the hospital twice in my life. Well, 3 times actually. But each time I was in the hospital for a heart attack that came out of nowhere, and for COVID double pneumonia back in March. I got the virus right away because I like to be first at everything. I don't like to wait. I figured this way I'll get it over with. I didn't plan to get COVID double pneumonia though. But it was the nurses that helped me to get better. There are a lot of male nurses, but until fairly recently, I think more women went into nursing than men. And nurses spend more time with patients than the physicians. The physicians would come to check in once a day in the evening, and usually very brief. But nurses would come in and they'd spend time. And nurses took my hand and they sat on the bed and they said to me, "You're going to be okay." And those little things mean a lot to people when you're really sick. And when patients would come to me, like I said this last time, and I don't know who was here, so I don't know if I'm repeating certain things, but I'll tell you one thing: nobody learns anything by hearing it once. We learn things through repetition. So when I work with people, and I work with people who are suffering with physical illness, physical body pain caused by stress, very often with a TMJ connection, because bruxism causes a lot of physical symptoms besides neck pain and facial pain and headaches and ringing in the ears. There's a lot of symptomology that goes along with that. And so psychiatrists and psychologists will send me patients that they're not having great success with, so that I can do a body, mind, spirit approach, which is the concept for another one of these lectures that I'm going to be doing. But suffice it to say that it's an all-encompassing thing, that sensitivity has a lot to do with that. And the point that I was making is that when I was in the hospital, it was the nurses that really helped me through. Simple things with touch. Now, as a dentist, everything we do is about touch. They tell you, you have to develop a light touch. You know, when we're working on patients, there are very few fields in medicine where we work with people so intimately as dentists. You know, when I went to dental school, the dean made a speech and said, never shake hands with a patient. Never touch your patient. I mean, how can you do dentistry without touching a patient? I shake hands with every patient. I greet them and I thank them for coming in. Because as I said last time, when someone trusts you with their health, I consider it an honor. They don't have to come to you. They could go anywhere. But if they choose to come to you, you want to treat them like they're a guest in your home. And that's how I always did it, no matter where I worked. When I worked Medicaid, when I first got out of school, I worked in very poor neighborhoods where most of the people were on welfare, because that was a thing in those days. I don't know if there are still a lot of Medicaid dental clinics, but in New York City in those days, there were a lot of them. And because I had been treated so poorly in dental school, I didn't have a lot of confidence when I got out. And it took a lot for me. You know, I remember it was even hard for me to look for my first job as a dentist, to call. I looked in the New York Times for potential jobs. And I remember being so nervous to call. And I wound up running a Medicaid clinic. I was the only dentist there. There was about 4 or 5 chairs. And I got my experience running 4 or 5 chairs at the same time. And it was an amazing way for me to learn, because you only learn so much in dental school. You learn a lot more once you get out. And when you're put in a situation like that, you have to learn. You're learning on the job. When I first, I did that for 2.5 years before I wound up buying my own practice. And as I said last time too, I bought a practice from a man who was only 54 years old, and he had a terminal illness. And he had had that practice for a very long time, and he was nothing like me. This guy used to play opera in the office, and I was a rock and roll person. I was not playing opera, and we didn't have, it was a very different vibe that he brought to the practice. And he interviewed a lot of people, and there were a lot of young dentists that wanted that practice. But the universe has a plan, you know, that's part of the spiritual aspect of what I talk about. Things happen the way they're supposed to. You know, in my dream, I always thought I'd be working in Manhattan in a very fancy upscale practice. And I wound up in a section of the Bronx in New York City in a very middle class practice. And it was wonderful. I wound up staying there for a very long time, about 25 years, because I found that the people in that practice were much more grateful than the very rich people in Manhattan, who are so demanding that no matter what you do, they don't seem to really appreciate it. And the middle class people seem to be very appreciative. And I really enjoyed all my years of working in that area. So very often the universe will guide you into doing something that you may not have even thought of on your own, which I think is a very interesting concept as well. So when I said we were taught never to shake hands with people, you know, the simple act of putting your hand on someone's shoulder can make them feel calm. When I first joined the Association for Spirituality and Psychotherapy, most psychologists and psychiatrists are taught to not touch their patients. And when I told them about my experience and how I do my work, I share the way I'm doing with you. I talk about personal things in my own life because hopefully there are some of you out there that can relate to what I'm saying. Because as people, you know, we're all unique to a degree, but we're also identical to a degree. There's only so many things that a human being can experience. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with the 12-step programs. I work with a lot of people who are addicted to different substances, and I teach them how to think differently. And very often they're very sensitive people and they're very creative people, because what I'm going to be getting into is that sensitive people are often called ultra sensitives. And very often, they tend to become alcoholics. They drink too much and they take drugs because they feel things so deeply and it's overwhelming to them. Some people, their minds never stop. They get so many thoughts. The input is incredible and their minds are working constantly and they can't relax. And they look to other substances to help them to relax, whether it's food or drugs or shopping. You can OD on almost anything, you know? And so I work with people like that. And when I told these psychiatrists and psychologists that when I work with people, that I talk about events in my own life, because I don't know if any of you have ever gone to a psychologist or psychiatrist, but very often they don't say anything. They listen to you. They encourage you to speak, but they don't give you feedback because very often they're taught not to. But I'm not limited by that training. And so I share a lot about myself in hopes that that will help you identify with what I'm saying. And that's the essence of these 12-step programs, which are very spiritual programs. And I'll go into this in detail at some point, but I've mentioned the word spiritual a few times, and I just want to explain that it has nothing to do with religion, because religion can be wonderful for people, but it tends to divide us in a way because it puts you into a certain category. And automatically, other people not of your religion are outside of that category. So it can be divisive in a sense, where spirituality brings us all together. It brings us all together as one, because all it asks is that you believe in a force greater than yourself. And you could call it nature or the universe or God, whatever is comfortable for you, as long as you know that it isn't you. Because when you think that it's you that's controlling everything in your life, then you tend to blame yourself when things don't go the way you think they should, the way you want them to go. And one of the spiritual concepts is that if you don't get what you want, it's not because you're being punished. The universe didn't single you out to be the ultimate victim of the universe. It's because you're supposed to have something better than what you wanted. And if you got the thing you wanted, you wouldn't be available for the really good thing that's coming to you. But the problem is that we have to have patience. Not everything comes to us when we want it. And as human beings, we lack patience. We tend to want everything right away. And that's a very difficult lesson to learn. But that thought is one of the spiritual principles that I talk about, how to change your mindset. You could be frustrated and say, oh, nothing ever works out for me. My friend gets everything he wants. All he has to do is try. Everything seems to work out for him. But when I try to do it, nothing works out for me. And so that's looking at things in a frustrating kind of way. The flip side of that is, and again, what I tell people when I work with them, and especially with stutterers, that rather than look at it as a hopeless thing, you look at it as hope, as a hopeful thing. You know that thing about looking at the glass half empty or half full? It's the same thing, right? But it helps if you put a positive mindset on it. So as I said earlier, if one person could do something, if I could cure myself of something as difficult as stuttering, which is a really hard thing to do, then you could do it as well. Because I didn't do magic. I learned to control my thoughts. And that's a very powerful thing to do. And it's a very difficult thing to do because it's very difficult to observe your thoughts in an objective manner. And all the boxes are black now. Is there anybody there that's going to be, oh, I'm going to switch to this screen. There's more people here. Everybody's on their camera, and that's nice. I would much rather speak to people than a black box. No offense to the black box people, but it's very hard. If you don't get feedback when you're addressing an audience and you don't see anybody's face, it's like you're talking to yourself. Like I have not done any Zoom comedy shows yet. I have no intention of performing on a computer. It doesn't feel good. It's like you need the energy of the audience, you know, to feed back. But I did agree to do one thing next month, as an aside, for the Guinness Book of Records. Someone organized the longest variety show on record. It's going to be a 60-hour show with people from every country in the world. And it's going to be comedy and music. And they asked me if I would host for an hour and MC, and I agreed. So I have to start preparing because I haven't been on stage in 8 months, since March. To get back to sensitivity. So men need to be more comfortable with feeling their sensitivity and admitting to sensitivity and understanding that it doesn't take away from you as a man to feel sensitive. And actually, it makes you a stronger person and it makes your patients much more comfortable. It's like in my practice, I devoted myself to creating what I considered to be painless techniques. So even if you're giving someone a palatal injection, which is one of the most uncomfortable things that you can do besides a mandibular block, I would inject through the buccal. I would make the buccal area numb first, and then I would inject through the buccal into the palate without sticking the needle directly into the palate. I would do that afterwards, but patients find that much more comfortable, you know, and I would leave topical anesthetic in for a few minutes, like 5 minutes, because I was not in a hurry, because that's what I would want in my own mouth. When I go to the dentist, I don't want to feel the injection. And too many dentists, even with me in the chair, and they know me, they don't leave the topical in long enough. And sometimes I feel awkward schooling them on that, you know. I once went to a lecture where the dentist giving the lecture said, never use topical on children because it's good for them to feel a little pain. And I was so incensed, I was so upset that someone would say that. And I raised my hand and I said to him, I want to ask you a question. When you go to your dentist, do you want to feel a little pain? And he didn't really have a good answer for it, because I don't think anybody really wants to feel a little pain unless you're into pain, you know, and most people that I know are not. So I think it behooves you to go out of your way to make patients comfortable. One of the things that I thought was so special about me being asked to do these things is that when I went to school, no one cared about stuff like this. All they cared about, you know, we had to do gold inlays. Do you guys still have to make inlays? Shake your head. I can see if you say no or yes. No, you probably don't even know what gold inlays are. Gold inlays are a nightmare, but that's all they cared about, us fulfilling our requirements. And I don't know if you remember, but the guy who was in charge of Crown Bridge had a Confederate flag in his office and a sign that said, "The South will rise again." Not the nicest man. And they were only concerned with fulfilling your requirements, nothing about the humanity of being in a practice and treating patients, other human beings, and how to treat them and how to react to them, which is what leads you to be a successful practitioner. You know, you can know everything from a book, but if you're not good with people, you're not going to be as successful. So it's important to be open to that. And as I said, I got my experience when I was teaching at NYU. We had a very vast multicultural background, and some people grew up in places where they didn't experience that. There was no hugging in their culture. They just didn't have it. And I would teach them that it's okay to do that. Be friendly to people, be open. And it's not easy for some people to do, to overcome their training. But it's, first of all, it's important to acknowledge whether that's a weakness for you. If that's hard for you to do, then you need to work on that. You need to think about that. So what I'm going to do now, someone asked me last time what the most powerful book was that I ever read. And for me, it was a book called Are You Really Too Sensitive? And it was written by a psychic, by a woman named Marcy Calhoun. And it was the most amazing book that I ever read, because it really put my life in order for me and explained to me why I felt things the way I did, because I am what you call an empath. And an empath is a person who feels what you feel, whether they like it or not. You don't really have a choice. When I'm in your presence, as I said, there was a time in my life, if you were sad and I was with you, I was sadder for you than you were. It left me feeling very weak, and I wanted to help so much, but it made me withdraw sometimes. And it's interesting because if I see a person in the street who's hurt in an accident, I can get a weak feeling in my knees. But if you came to my office and I had to do surgery on you, it wouldn't bother me at all, because I knew that I could help you. I knew that I could take you out of pain, and I knew that I had the ability to fix whatever problem it was, which is interesting to me too, because I'm not a handy person. I can't fix a lot of stuff in my house, but I could fix anything when it came to teeth. When I first started practicing, cosmetic dentistry was new, and I'm one of the first people to put teeth, actually to put them back together again, to take a front tooth and reattach the piece that was missing. And I used to lecture on cosmetic dentistry for companies. When I first got out of school, they were using something, I don't even know if you guys ever even heard of it, called Adaptic. It was one of the first white filling materials, and so cosmetic dentistry has just blown up over the years. And that was my specialty. There were times when I would work on a patient for 8 hours and do an entire smile just with cosmetic bonding. This was even before porcelain veneers. And my work was in books. There was a beauty queen named Adrienne Arpel. When I say beauty queen, I don't mean in a pageant. She made beauty products. And she did a book on beauty, and she chose my work. I did her daughter's teeth for the book. She had severe tetracycline stain, and I covered it with bonding and gave her a beautiful smile. So in our profession, we have the ability to do that for people, which is amazing. The only other medical field like that is plastic surgery. So we're like dental plastic surgeons. And years ago, people apologize for being dentists. There was this thing a long time ago that you became a dentist if you weren't good enough to become an MD. And that's such BS, because we should all be very proud to be dentists. When MDs have a toothache, they don't go to another physician. They come to us, because we're doctors of the dentition. And there's very few people that have our knowledge, and we should be very proud of what we do. So Marcy Calhoun wrote this book, and she divides sensitives into what she calls ultra-sensitives. And I want to see if any of you guys relate to these categories, because there are there are two main categories of ultrasensitives of how we relate to our lives in the world. There are structural ultrasensitives, and then there are conceptual ultrasensitives. Structural ultrasensitives work by rules. They work exactly, they're very rigid people. They work by rules and regulations, whether the rules were set by your parents, if you grew up with very strict parents and you always follow the rules. They're very good at being on time, and they're very good at saying either yes or no. They can set boundaries. Conceptual ultrasensitives, on the other hand, are exactly the opposite. They lead their lives with no rules. They make choices on how they feel on a day-to-day basis. If you ever heard of that thing about the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, always expecting different results. Have you heard that? Okay, well, conceptual ultrasensitives don't look at it that way. They look at it as being optimistic. Like this may not have worked for me the last 100 times I tried it, but today it's going to work. I just have that feeling that today it's going to work. They tend to be very positive people. They tend to be, you know, very thoughtful people, very artistic, very creative, very left brain. The structural people are very right brain. In my life, I had to be both. As a dentist, very, very left brain. As a comedy person, very right brain, as a performer, you know? But in our lives, it's important to incorporate both to create balance. You want to create both of those things in your life. The other concepts are, the other categories of sensitives are visual, knowing, and feeling. So visual ultrasensitive experience their life by seeing things. They very often say, I see what you mean. You know, there are some people who say, I feel what you're saying. You know, those are feeling ultrasensitives. And knowing ultrasensitives are very interesting. And I wonder how many of you fall into this category. If you ever find yourself talking about something and you're not sure how you know it, but you still feel comfortable talking about it, you just know that you know it. Have any of you experienced that? You can click the little thing if you have. So that's referred to as a knowing ultrasensitive. And in spiritual terms, it may be that you were given this knowledge from a previous existence. Because there's a spiritual concept that says that we choose the families that we're born into before we're born. We have soul groups. And we choose the families that we're born into to learn lessons that we didn't learn in a previous life. So sometimes that carries over. And that's what made me understand that I could do some kind of healing work as a child on people, that I knew that intuitively that I could do that. And I bet a lot of you have that capability, that when you put your hands on somebody, when you touch your patients, they should feel a sense of calmness from you. You should be able to calm people down, because a lot of people come in, they're really scared. They've had very bad dental experiences, a lot of people, especially when they were children. And you can make them feel calm. And just by the simple act of putting your hand on their shoulder is the kind of thing that can make people feel calm. And when I told that to those psychologists that I work with, one of them came back to me after I gave a lecture to them, and he said, I got to tell you this story. I'm almost embarrassed to say it. He said, I was working with this woman and she was in tears. She was overwhelmed. She was just sobbing. And I couldn't help it. He said, I went over and I put my hand on her shoulder. He said he couldn't help it. And the next week she came back to him and she thanked him. And she said, thank you so much for doing what you did, for putting your hand on my shoulder. It meant so much to me and it made me feel calm. And that simple little act meant so much to that woman. And we're in that position all the time. No one touches people as much as dentists. You know, when you're sitting behind them, you're actually cradling their head in your hands. How much closer can you get? We work inside them. You're in their mouth. You're inside of a person. You know, it's a very unique opportunity. And so touch is critically important. And when you touch people, you have to allow your hands to connect to your heart. And I don't know if that makes sense, if that means something to you. Your heart chakra is the most powerful organ in the body. Your heart's more powerful than the brain, believe it or not. It puts out a lot more energy electrically. And so when you touch someone, they should be able to feel that you want them to feel better. They should be able to tell from your touch that it's important to them, it's important to you that they feel better. And people can get that. They can feel that from you. And I want to leave time for you guys to ask questions, but I'm just gonna read this little thing. I'm gonna try and do this fast because these are questions that I use as a questionnaire when I work with people who are suffering with stress-related illness. And I do a sensitivity test with them. And I ask them these questions to put them into the right category of ultrasensitives. And I'll just run through them quickly and see, write down for yourself, yes or no, if this pertains to you. I have the ability to feel what other people are feeling as if I was feeling it myself. I can feel their physical symptoms in my own body, sometimes more than they do, yes or no. I relate to the world by following rules and regulations. I have the ability to say yes and no. I make my choices from the information available to me at the moment, even if in the same situation in the past, my choices didn't work out. I think of it as being optimistic that things will work out this time. I often feel confused, as if I was born without the book of rules that everyone else seems to have. Yeah, and confusion is a big thing for ultrasensitives because we get so much information that it can be confusing to us. I often ask other people who are having the same problems as me to tell me what they did. Each person has a different answer, which confuses me even more. I have a very poor sense of time. I always think I have more time than I actually do. I experience life mainly through the awareness of seeing. I often say, I see what you mean. I'm highly visual and can actually see pictures in my mind's eye. When I understand something, I often say, I know what you mean. I feel things very deeply and they touch me. I love the texture of things like silk, soap bubbles, satin, a smooth countertop, etc. I can often feel what has happened in the past of another person, place, or thing. I am released from an emotional tie only when the other person breaks it. I hold on to painful relationships much too long because I can't bear the pain of losing them. I can connect with people on a very deep level of experience. I can use what's happening in my own life to experience the condition that is troubling someone else. I have arrived at the conclusion that I have experienced great difficulties in my life, so I'll be more able to empathize with others. I tend to create change or enter people's lives when they're about to experience change. People tend to pass through my life instead of remaining for long periods of time. People tend to re-enter my life even after many years when they're ready to experience change again. I often talk about things that other people can't understand, but find interesting and want to learn more about. I feel that I must make a difference in the world. I don't open up to others about the obstacles I face. I am hard on myself for what I feel I should be doing but are not doing. I can sense potential danger in almost any situation. I don't like to travel or to be in any situation I don't have control over. I tend to use logic to make decisions rather than my emotions. I can only express my emotions after having a drink or two. I can be highly judgmental of others and myself. I do what I feel I should do rather than what I really want to do. I resist change in myself and my surroundings at all costs. It makes me too uncomfortable. And with that, I think I'm going to open it up to questions. I wish there was time and I would give you the categories that those fall into, but if you made some notes, we can do that at the next lecture, because I think this is really important to delve into what makes us, what our makeup is as people, and how we respond to the things that we feel, because that's going to have a very big emphasis on what you do when you get out of school, and even while you're in school, while you're working in the clinic. So is Joanne around? I guess you can facilitate if there are questions. Oh, somebody asked a good question. When you take away the pain from others, do you accept it onto yourself? Does the pain disappear? What I didn't say was, I had alluded to it. When you're working on patients, you have no control over the energy that the person brings in. Some people are very positive, some people are very negative, and you don't want to absorb their energy. And there are things that you can do to protect your heart chakra. And there are two things in particular. One is a white light technique, where you just close your eyes for like 10 seconds. Like if you're in somebody's presence and they're being very argumentative or they're being just really negative in some way, but you have no choice but to work on them. You don't want to absorb that negativity. So you do this thing, you go behind them for a second. They don't see this. You close your eyes for 10 seconds. You picture your heart, whatever that looks like to you. It doesn't have to be an anatomical heart. It's like whatever it looks like in your mind. And you picture a white light going around it 3 times. And that'll protect your heart from absorbing anybody's negative energy. The other technique is called the diamond technique. And it's very similar. You close your eyes for 10 seconds and you picture your heart being enclosed in a diamond. Nothing can get through a diamond. It's the densest substance, right? And you picture the diamond around your heart, and that'll protect your heart. And then when you're finished, you have to remember to release it so that you can feel things again. But this way, you don't have to worry about absorbing that energy. When I do healing work and I'm doing like touch therapy, I'm always careful not to internalize the pain, the physical pain that I'm relieving from someone else. I once had a patient that was a psychiatrist who flew in to see me from California, and she was a very successful psychiatrist, and she was suffering from depression herself. And after many years, her problem was that she was internalizing the emotional pain that she was helping her patients with. And she became so depressed herself that she couldn't function. And when she was referred to me, and I didn't accept her right away on the first phone call because I felt it would be egotistical of me to just say, yeah, get on a plane and fly all the way to New York and I'll work on you. But after speaking to her for a while, I had a feeling that I could help her. So I said to her, if you're willing to come across the country to New York, I'll see you every day for a week, because sometimes I'll see a patient for 3 or 4 hours. I don't put a limit on it, because that kind of work is done by trust. You have to feel very comfortable with somebody. And she came to New York. I saw her every day. I think the first visit was 4 hours, the next day 3 hours. And I spent hours with her every day. And by the end of the week, she felt she was a whole different person. She had let go of whatever was inside of her that was causing her that severe depression. And I taught her how to protect her heart so that she would no longer internalize the negativity from the people that she was helping. So I hope that answered the question. Somebody said, I'm wondering the same thing. Yes, I hear you.
I'm curious if you've worked with children, and if so, how, I don't know, you calm them down and.
Yeah, well, I work with children as a dentist. I worked with children as young as 2 and 3 years old. Mm-hmm. And I was able to give them local anesthetic without them even moving, without them feeling it. I would play a little game with them. I would show them the needle and I'd squirt it. And I'd say, hey, it's a water gun. And I would let them squirt it. And then I'd put topical in their mouth for at least 5 minutes. until I was numb. I left it in so long that you couldn't possibly feel anything. And then I would give them, you know, the anesthetic, never felt a thing. And I'd have the parents right in the room next to the chair because I wanted the parents to see everything that I was doing. So for me, it was easy to work on children. But I think it's important as a dentist to recognize if you're not cut out to work on children, don't do it. Because that's what creates fearful patients. Not everybody is cut out to work on children. The same way not everybody is cut out to do surgical extractions. You know, if that's not your thing, send it to a specialist, send it out. Don't try to be a hero and do every single facet of dentistry. You know, when you graduate from school and you have huge loans, there's a tendency to want to see every patient that you could see, right? But you also have to be realistic that not everybody is an expert at every single thing. So if you don't feel that you're capable of working on children, if you don't have that temperament, then don't do it. You know, but yeah, I worked on kids all the time. And that's why I talk about sensitivity, because I was saying that I bet all of you are more sensitive than you want to cop to. People don't really like to talk about it because they look at it as a weakness. But it's not a weakness at all. It's a tremendous strength. You just have to eliminate people from your circle who don't honor your sensitivity. People who tell you, oh, you're too sensitive, you're taking it the wrong way. You know, bullies do that when they make fun of you. And then you complain and they're like, well, I was just joking. And you're like, okay, well, what was the joke? I have a good sense of humor. To explain the joke to me. It seemed like you were being nasty. I don't know. I'm very anti-bullying. You know, people think that a lot of guys, especially in the comedy world, people think it's a good idea to put each other down. Men do that a lot, you know, and I reject that. I don't like that. So when I do radio shows, they never do that to me. I've done some of the craziest radio shows, but they don't do that to me because they know that I don't handle that. I don't respond to that, and I don't allow that because I expect respect from people. I respect them and I want them to do the same with me. And that's how I go through life. That's how I honor my own sensitivity. I don't allow people in who don't honor my sensitivity because those things aren't funny to me and that hurts me. So I don't watch horror movies. I don't subject myself to things that make me uncomfortable. I don't see the entertainment value in watching slasher films and things like that. People seem to like that. I don't get it. I don't find it entertaining. So I don't subject myself to things that I find uncomfortable. There's enough uncomfortable things in the world in general. I don't need to pay for it or to look for it. It's already there. You know? My next lecture, by the way, is going to be a body, mind, spirit approach to dentistry. And all these things are really related. So if it sounds like I'm repeating certain things, again, nobody learns anything by hearing it once. If the information resonates with you, you'll learn it intellectually. Like I always tell people sometimes that you don't need to take notes. You'll remember what you need to remember because it'll make sense to you. This is not like math equations. It's about thought. It's about cognitive things. That's why in this new book that I wrote, Fight the Fear, Overcoming Obstacles That Stand in Your Way, one of the things that meant a lot to me was it was the #1 release in several categories. One was medicine and psychology, and another one was cognitive behavioral therapy, which is about thought. It's about changing your mind. That was my first book, Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind. You can literally change who you are by changing the way you think. And that to me is a really interesting concept.
Speaking of discomfort, are you the type of person who likes to travel?
Traveling is very hard for me, which is why I made myself do it. I don't know if you guys remember. Last October, I made myself go to Japan all by myself. And it was the hardest thing I ever did. I still can't believe it. Last October, I went for 2 weeks. The flight was unbelievable. I mean, it was like 14 hours in the air. And I was the only non-Japanese person. So they turned out all the lights when we were only in the air for 4 hours. And I'm like, why'd you do that? And they said, because it's like 5 in the morning in Japan. And I'm like, yeah, but we're not in Japan. And so I was alone on everyone slept, and I was like walking in the plane by myself. It was crazy. And I was lost every day. I challenged myself in every possible way. And I did it. I made friends. I performed in 2 shows over there. I went to spiritual meetings. I went on the subway every single day. And it's admittedly, it's the most complicated subway system in the world. And as an ultra sensitive, I am bombarded with information so much. I'm always confused. My ADHD kicks my butt on a constant basis. I suffer tremendous confusion. I need people, the concierges in the hotel were kind enough to write instructions for me every day on where I had to go. And they wrote them in Japanese also, so that I could show them to people. Because in Japan, I don't know if any of you have ever been there, but when you're like in New York, if you get off the subway, it's easy to find your way to the street. In Japan, very often you're 4 levels under the ground, and there's 18 to 20 exits, and each exit takes you to a different part of the city. So one day I was stuck underground for an hour. I couldn't get out until I found someone who spoke enough English that they could get me out, because my Japanese was very limited. I took level 1 3 times, and I had a million books with me and on my phone, but still it's very hard. Most people there do not speak English, not in the subways anyway. And so I did the same thing with Europe. I made myself go to Spain and Italy by myself. I went to the Cannes Film Festival by myself. All of these are challenges that I do because traveling is incredibly difficult for me. And I'm every single category of ultra sensitive. So until I learned how to handle it, my life was really hard. And sometimes it still is. But that's why I confront it, because I'll never let fear get the best of me. And that's how I got through dental school. I said, they'll never get the best of me. I'm going to graduate and I'm going to go on to do everything that I ever wanted to do. And despite the negativity, I don't know, God gave me strength to do that, you know, that I was able to withstand all the negativity and all the confusion. And that's why I write books about it, because I want to inspire people, because it can't just be me. When you know, these books became bestsellers because people resonate with the information that's in them. It makes sense to them. And that's what I always ask people when I work with them. Does what I'm saying make sense to you? And if it makes sense to them, then they can get better. Because it's all about thought. Everything is about thought. Thought is incredibly powerful. And that's why it's important to examine your thoughts and see what thoughts you're holding that might not be working for you in your best interest. Do I seek discomfort, or do I just take it? Interestingly enough, I don't have to seek discomfort. It just comes to me. Many things make me uncomfortable. I've just learned that. And it's interesting. Sometimes I ask, why am I being tested that way? And it's exactly what I said. I've had to overcome many obstacles in my own life so that I can be helpful to other people and tell them, because if I can do it, you can do it. And in the beginning, until you know that, when these obstacles come up, you tend to feel that you're being punished in some way, that life is throwing you these obstacles, putting things in your way to make it difficult for you to achieve the things that you want to achieve. When I got out of dental school and I was able to overcome all those obstacles, it kind of made me ready for life. Because in life, a lot of weird things happen that you don't expect. You wake up in the morning, you have no idea what's going to happen. We're not mind readers. And a lot of weird things happen. I don't even want to say they're negative, because sometimes things that start out negative turn into something positive, you know, and we can't really be a judge of that. So I don't really have any choice. I'm always being confronted by things that make me uncomfortable. And I always find a way to overcome them, because I don't like that that happens. If other people can do it, I can do it. That's what I tell myself. If millions of other people can travel comfortably, I have to do it too. So I don't know that I'd go to Japan again alone, but I did it once. It's not the kind of trip that you make on a constant basis, you know?
Dr.
You know,
Gurian,
one thing, Dr. Gurian and those who are still on, your next session where you speak about yoga and meditation. And I don't know if any of the students on here are yogis or have done a physical practice, whatever it was, or a sport, and you don't think you can do it. And there's certain poses in yoga that when I started practicing, I thought never, or fearful about headstands and handstands. And I think that when you face those fears and you're practicing and you see you can do them, they don't become fears anymore, and that it can play out in your everyday life. And possibly you are going to speak to that next week, but I think some of the things that you don't think you can do and you learn to do them, it helps to face fears.
Absolutely. And in line with what you just said, when you do that, you become an inspiration to other people. There may be people in your yoga class who also feel that they can't do it. And then they see you do it. And that gives them the courage to try. And that's the essence of this, that you know, when you confront your own fear, it allows other people to confront their fears, because they see if you can accomplish something that they can do it too. So the topic next week is going to be a body, mind, spirit approach to dentistry, how to incorporate that thinking. And again, some of it is stuff that we've touched on. It's all connected. There's no separate talks about it's only about one thing. All these concepts are all part of the whole. They're all connected together. Gratitude and service we're going to be talking about, you know, the whole body, mind, spirit approach. So I really appreciate that you guys are showing up for this. I think it's really important, and it's very reaffirming that there's interest. Because if only 3 people were there, it wouldn't be as good. But it's nice that enough people are interested. And I hope that this is meaningful to you and that you can use some of this, even if you get one thing, you know, one thing that changes you a little bit in a positive way, then that's a major thing. And then it's been successful. If everybody picks up one little thing that could be helpful to them, then that's great.
And I also think, Dr. Gurian, we have many levels of different students last week and this week. And students, when you were in dental school, get overburdened emotionally with the stress of exams and preclinical work, board exams, patient care, so many things. But the things that you're talking about are things that they individually can think about or remember, because once they're done with all these projects and tests and all, they're going to be delivering patient care. And it's these other things that will attract your patients to you. All the things that you spoke about last week and this week that will make you successful. Because patients assume you're providing good care, but if you get that connection with the things Dr. Gurian's been talking about, you will be blessed in dentistry.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important. And again, I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity to do this, because I never got this. Nobody ever gave a talk like this when I went to school. It was all about teeth and techniques and stuff like that. And I don't even know how many of you are from different years, like who are first year students or fourth year students. But it would be interesting between now and next time, if you do have questions, write them down so that we can address them during the course of, you know, because I can talk for a long time, as you can see. It's easy for me. I don't run out of stuff to say, but I want to make sure that I can answer your questions too. So, you know, think about it during the week, and if questions pop up, write them down, and hopefully we can address them at the next talk.
And again, I thank the students and faculty for staying on. And I think these sessions right now during this time with Dr. Gurian are very special and important. And I thank you all, and especially thank Dr. Gurian.
Thank you. And I thank all of you too. It's very special for me that you guys show up and that you're interested in this, because I'm happy to do it. It's very, very important to me. And I look forward to seeing you next week. I hope next week will be a wonderful week, and I wish you all a week of happiness. And I look forward to seeing you guys next Wednesday. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching the Happiness Channel. I really appreciate it. I hope you got something out of it. If you want to see more of our videos, please click on the boxes on either side of me. And don't forget to like, comment, and most important of all, please subscribe. That's what helps us to do more videos. I hope to be doing one a week. And in the meantime, I wish you another week of happiness, and I hope to see you real soon. Thanks.